Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Our Greatest Strength. I am Dimple Shah,
And my name is Glenn Keller.
and I am personally super excited to welcome Ashley Robbins. Ashley, thank you so much for being our guest.
I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you, so are we. So a little about how we both know each other. I was involved in my son's robotics teams for about 3 years, and I started working very closely with Ashley about a year back when our team qualified for the Worlds. Ashley is the executive director of First Indiana Robotics, also known as the president of First Indiana Robotics. We changed titles there, right, Ashley? And I have had nothing but respect for her and her leadership, and was amazed by all the things that Finn or First Indiana Robotics has been involved in. And especially, I kept watching Ashley every time she used to walk around in the events and wasn't just all. So here we are. Thanks again for being here, Ashley.
Awesome, very excited. Great introduction. I feel like you covered everything about me.
I'm sure there's so much more I could
Yeah,
share.
I'm sure there is a little more. Okay, so can you tell us about when you first started working with immigrants, Ashley?
Absolutely. So I would say the first time I really started working with immigrants was probably college. I attended Purdue University, and while there's a huge international population, but there's also a really strong population of first generation, second generation immigrants. So I was working with people in my classes, I was living with people in my dorms, in my extracurriculars, my clubs, huge immigrant population. And that was really the first time I was exposed to and worked directly and lived with immigrants.
Wow, so a long history.
Yeah, to varying degrees, right? After that, I moved back to a small town in Indiana where that population is significantly less than it was at Purdue. But yeah, I would say on and off for probably the better part of 15 years.
Wow, 15 years is a long time. So, Ashley, how do you take down barriers to enter into your program, especially Finn, for immigrants, and in particular, immigrants that might not have very many resources available at their disposal?
Absolutely. So like Dimple said, I'm the executive director of First Indiana Robotics, and First Robotics is actually an international organization. It exists in more than 30 countries and provides, mentor-based competitive robotics students for kids worldwide, which is awesome. One of the great benefits of that is that we aren't just providing programs for Native American students, right? So, American-born students. That means a lot of our programs already exist in other languages. They exist in other cultures. So one, our program is built to support immigrants wherever they are. So that's a great strength. I think beyond that, in terms of what we do as an organization, is we're constantly trying to connect our teams, our students, our immigrant families to existing resources. And part of that is just the community that is First Indiana Robotics. We have teams in all corners of the state. We have teams from all kinds of socioeconomic backgrounds, varying levels of education in both technical and non-technical fields. And so I think it's about building a community around everyone that needs it. Every student should have access to these programs, even if they're not necessarily interested. They should have the ability, right? That's what we want. We want students to get exposed to STEM earlier and have access to it. And I think what we're really trying to do is find resources to be shared within our communities. We're trying to connect people to, what are our high income, low resource teams that can lend equipment or share resources, right? Or can carpool, can share transportation, even things as easy as that, right? Let's buy pizzas for another team because they have to work all day on Saturday and need lunch. Little things like that. It's the small things that we can do for each other that help. Finn is a small team. We have 5 staff members, 3 of which are full-time, 2 part-time. So we certainly can't help all of the hundreds of teams and thousands of students individually, but what we can do is help each other make connections to do that.
Very interesting. So, speaking of interesting, what was the most interesting thing, or it could be two, even three interesting things that you learned about immigrants from working in this program and working with immigrants?
I think one great thing that I've learned is that there's really space for everyone. It feels like now we're existing in a world that feels really divided. It feels really competitive. It feels like you're always trying to one up everyone else. And I think working with immigrants, I've just learned so much that there is space for everyone. I think people want to see other people be successful and people want to help others. And it's been really great to see as we welcome people who are learning our culture, are coming from, to a new unfamiliar place, the fact that they are looking for a space and we can offer that, and vice versa, right? The fact that they're also opening spaces for people and welcoming people into those. I think it's so fascinating to see. It doesn't have to be you versus them. It really can be you and them working collaboratively. And that's just been, really powerful to see.
Wonderful. So Ashley, you've always been such a fantastic ally to immigrants. Now, there must be some part of immigrants, maybe lifestyle, language barriers, anything that you had to deal with, or I guess that was difficult for you to get on board with. Were there any experiences that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think one is unintentional bias. I think everyone at their core, wants to believe they're a good person and that they, what are the phrases? I don't see color, gender, I don't see those things. But I think everyone has a little bit of that, just unintentionally. And I think that's part of it is you have to really make an intentional effort to learn about people and welcome people and ask questions. I think another thing for me was, fear of not knowing or fear of not wanting to look uncultured or unaware. I think sometimes the best thing to do when you're unsure of what someone else needs, right? And working with immigrant populations, if I don't understand their culture or I don't know about it, the best thing to do is ask, right? I feel like, Dimple, you've shared so much with me about your family and your customs and the way that, you operate. And it's taught me a lot, and I feel really safe now in asking you those questions, which is great. But I think sometimes we're so nervous about asking questions about things we don't know and so worried about how that reflects on us that we're really missing an opportunity. So I think part of it is that bias, is that fear of things we don't know, and being scared to ask about it. And then I think too, having to understand cultural differences is a real barrier, right? My value system might be different here in the US and where I grew up, even in the Midwest, right? I've been in Indiana for most of my life. My family is mostly from here. So even what I learned and what's important to me growing up might be different for other cultures, right? The way we think about family, the way we think about resources and work and balance, those things are different culturally. So I think that's been a big one was, how do I try to learn what those are for other people?
Yeah.
Love it, love it, love it. And I'm so excited because one of the things that I always say is we have so many allies over here. When I say we, I'm talking for myself as an immigrant. We have so many allies over there. And as an immigrant, it is my responsibility to share things because people want to help. And I keep saying people, they don't know what they don't know. And if I share, then it gives others an opportunity to support me. So I love it. I love it.
Really cool stuff. So Ashley, what do you, from working with immigrants in a program like this in particular, what do you wish everybody knew?
So two things that I wish everyone knew is one, there's that really popular phrase, I'm sure you guys have heard it, rising tides lift all ships, right? So if we work together, everyone benefits. So resources aren't scarce, there isn't a shortage. It takes nothing to be kind and to help others. So the more we can work together, the better it makes everyone. I think that's a really important one. And the other one that I was thinking about today was I wish that everyone spent as much time learning and listening as they do talking and teaching. I think that that's so important. I think a lot of times we think immigrants are at a disadvantage in terms of knowledge. Maybe, oh, they don't know the things, they don't know the way we do things, or I'm going to tell them the right way to do this, which sometimes can come from a helpful place. But I think sometimes it's just as valuable if we stop and we listen and we learn from them, because they have just as much value in teaching us. And they have just as much, if not more, information to share with us. So I really wish that, and it's something I've learned to do in working with immigrants, and I wish others would really think about not just what we have to give and what we can help teach others, but what we can learn from others as well. I think is so important.
So, Ashley, one of the last questions we have is in Finn, especially in all the first events, I've seen you work with immigrants from like different part of the world. Literally, we had like 159 teams from literally all around the world in the worlds. So do you feel that immigrants from one part of the country are treated differently than other part of the world? And if so, how?
I do. And it's something I think has probably gotten worse. The current climate of the way things are in the US, I think that if you are from a culture or you're an immigrant coming from somewhere that looks more like us, you're Western European, you're coming from, Ireland or France, or, if you tend to look more white, I do think it's easier for you to kind of blend in culturally here. And I think if you are Hispanic or Indian or, Asian, I think it's a lot harder. I think, again, that goes back to that unintentional bias that I talked about and the way that we feel about those populations. And I think sometimes people are threatened, thinking there's all of this really negative discourse and narrative around, job loss and around schools and families and safety. And I think there's so much misinformation. We live in such a strong digital age, right? Where we have better access and faster access to information now than ever before, which is great. That's changing the world. But at the same time, I think it spreads a lot of fear and misinformation. And I think that in terms of, is it easier for some populations, or are some immigrant populations treated differently? Yeah, I think if you're able to assimilate easier, it's probably easier for you in the US. And if you're someone who has a strong accent, or their skin happens to be darker, it can be a lot tougher for you. And that's a hard truth, right? I think that's really hard for us to acknowledge and recognize, but it is true.
Yes, it is true. And you'd think, what, this is the 8th episode, and this is the first time it's coming up in our interview. So we learned something new from our guests every single day. And what you said resonated with me. So yes, it definitely is true.
I think one thing that we really encounter too is that traditionally, if you look at STEM and you look at engineering, it is a heavily white male dominated field. And that's just, there's tons of demographics that show that, right? And so we're working to tear down barriers, we're working to open this to new people. But when that's your primary target audience, it's definitely ostracizing for people that don't fit that, right? They have to figure out, where do I make space in this and where do I fit in? So, we're always trying to work on that. And I think we've really fostered an inclusive space, but, you exist in a world inside and outside of your own organization.
Well, yeah, I would think, layering that gender issue on top of, the ethnic and racial and different country issues, especially if, maybe they're coming from a society where those gender issues are more embedded, like, in other words, nobody's interested in changing them except for women, right? That I would imagine that could be even more challenging as well.
It very much is. And I think that's why it's important. It's not lost on me, the importance of my own role, being the leader of a STEM-based youth organization, modeling strong female values and a strong female presence to both male and female students and non-binary students. It's good for them to see that. Adding people like Dimple, having her as a coach and adding her to our board of directors. It's important to have space for women in this field. And this week, I don't know when this will come out, but this week is actually the first ever Women in Tech Week here in Indiana. And so that's huge too. We should be raising this up and celebrating it and making sure that girls know, immigrant girls, you know, girls born here, everyone needs to know that there's a space for them in STEM, in STEAM, in robotics.
Very good, thank you.
Good.
Is there anything you would like to comment on or ask that we haven't brought up yet?
I think that what you guys are doing is so important. I think these are conversations that happen a lot behind closed doors and a lot in comfortable spaces. And it's great to have them in the open. I really appreciate, I watched some of your previous episodes, and I think it's great just to have these conversations and open them up and really have what feels like a really genuine dialogue, and just ask people, what's your experience been? What's that like? And I think that's really awesome that you guys are doing it.
You mentioned women in tech, Ashley, and Glenn and I were talking about how perfect of a guest you are for the Women in Tech week, to have you in this very, like you said, monumental week for women in tech. I think it's huge. And that's why we wanted to have this interview like this week.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad.
Ashley, thanks once again for being here with us and for all your candid share. And thanks for leading Finn the way you are right now. We very much appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being on, and thank you everyone for watching this episode of Our Greatest Strength. Please watch some of our previous episodes, and don't forget to subscribe, because we've got some great guests coming up.
Yeah, along the same lines, if you have any recommendations for guests who would love to be on our show, we are always on lookout for guests. So please reach out to us. And thanks again for listening.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.